It is opening day of SEMA. I don't think we're going to make it. So, as you likely just saw in the intro, I have made a mess of things. Bit knee deep in a wiring project for the Camaro. A wiring project that started with me ruining the master cylinders for the brakes in this car. Check out the video link above for that one. But when I started to take things apart, I realized that things had kind of spiraled out of control wiring wise. I didn't do things the way I wanted to do them the first time. I've learned some things since I first did them, and so I thought, this is my opportunity to make things better. Also, I want to make this car more serviceable. For example, to take the dashboard out, it took me 30 minutes, which doesn't seem like a lot of time until you're working on a race car, and just taking the dashboard out, taking 30 minutes is stupid. So the goal here is 30-second dashboard out, much cleaner wiring, and a little bit of some safety measures thrown in. So let me show you what I've done so far, what I've got, what's going in, and we'll piece it all together. This isn't going to be a wiring how-to. I'm not doing a mil-spec harness or anything crazy like that. Just want to go over some of the components, some of the rationale behind it, and show everything when it comes together. So here's the current state of wiring on the Camaro. You can see there's some stuff coming through the firewall. There's some wires sitting here. When I first built this car, it was a carbureted car for one, so it didn't have fuel injection. Didn't quite have all the same accessories that it has now. And then I also did stupid stuff, like, I wired the car with all red and black wires, so I don't know what anything is. And some components were attached to the dashboard, which made it harder to get out. And then some components, like, well, it's gone now, but my MSD box was mounted up on the firewall back there, which seemed like a great idea, kept it nice and safe, but it was hard to ever work on the car. So in light of everything, and not just the brake stuff, the alternator stuff from before, decided to pull everything out and just try to redo it a little more smartly. And so evidently, smartly means completely trashing my workbench, doing some wiring that is pretty to me, is probably ugly to some other people. But let me show you what I've got. I'm not good at electrical and wiring. I'm just not. It's not my thing. If it works and doesn't burn the car down, then I'm generally pretty happy with it. So I'm trying to take a slightly different approach with the car this time, and I'm trying to do things in subsystems. So my taillight harness, for example, I'm going to build that ahead of time, and that'll be a subsystem in place. So when I go to run all the wiring for it, it'll be there. The MSD box, which we'll see in just a little bit, that's another one where I'm going to build that all as a subsystem. And the gauge cluster, or the switch panel for this car, is also another subsystem. So let me show you that. So this here is a new gauge panel for the car. Now I had a similar gauge panel to this before. It had a slightly different layout. In fact, let me show you. There we go. Here's the old gauge panel here. So you can see the switch went in there. 1, 2, 3, 4 gauges, the same number of gauges. This was for a This was for a low oil pressure light, which I'm not going to run anymore. And then the battery cutoff switch was here on the dash. And I'll talk more about what's replacing that later. This is the old configuration, so let's take a look at the new configuration. So here is the new gauge layout. I got my 4 gauges in place. I've got my temperatures on this side. I've got oil pressure here. I've got wideband for one side here. This blank area, that's going to be for the Holley display. There's a little touchpad display thing. It'll fit perfectly right here. We've got my switches. That's going to be the main power cutoff switch. We'll show more on that in a minute. And then also, it might be hard to see. Let me take the cover off. Sorry, take a sec. There's a USB port here now. And so that's going to connect to the Holley, so I can just plug right into the dash and tune the car. So nice new front layout. And I've also worked on cleaning up the back. Let me show you that. So here's the back side of the assembly, and I'm just trying to keep things as clean and as neatly organized as I can and future-proof things a little bit. So this is the back of my switch panel. I'm only using, what am I using? I'm using 4 switches on this, so I had 2 extra switches left over. What I've done this time versus last time is I went ahead and I ran wires for those, and I've got them labeled out. So it's probably gonna be hard to see here, but that says, if it'll focus, it won't. It says spare 5, so I know it's spare switch 5. I've got another one over here, which is the same kind of deal. This is spare 6. And then I've just tried to stub out the harness a little bit, add some wrapping to it where possible, where it works. So, you know, I've got things like, this is my 12 volt lead to turn things on. This is some extra stuff lifting for the wideband of the dash. This is my tack lead for my autometer tack that's in there. What's this one? Oh, this is the switch for the cooling fans. I mentioned the yellow one again as a spare. And then I've got this guy here. It's for the starter. So that'll be to turn the starter solenoid on. And then, yeah, same thing coming out this side. I've got a ground and a 12 volt constant for the switch panel. And then I have my leads that are gonna run to the back. I've got one for lights, got one for the AccuSump, and then that's a spare one there. This is for sensors. This is the temperature sensors, water temp and oil temp. And then this goes off for the tack. And then this part, this little guy here, that's for the main power button. Because you notice we got rid of the battery cutoff switch. So let me show you that. I feel like if I apologize for the mess, this whole video would be me apologizing. But you know, I'm working here. So this is the new battery cutoff switch, or the isolator. It's for a company called Karcepts. I spent my own money because, as you can tell, I don't have any sponsors. So this does a similar thing that the old switch, this guy, used to do. But where this used to cut off positive flow from the battery, this one works a little bit differently. So the way this works, it has 3 poles. There is a big fat negative, there is a 12 volt in, and then there's a 12 volt ignition out. And the important part about this one is it's only rated for 30 amps. So the battery is going to attach to this post, and then this unit is going to be the connection between the chassis of the car and the battery. So that will provide our ground. There's also a 12 volt that comes off, gets attached to here, and this ignition wire, these two are connected to each other. This goes up to the front of the car. When you hit the kill switch, which here's one of them, when you hit the kill switch, it simultaneously cuts off the ground and cuts off the ignition signals. The idea here, it should just totally kill the car. The cool part about it is you don't need a big fat battery wire running anywhere anymore. You can use these switches all over the car. So you're not even stuck with one. You've got multiple switches that all can wire together. You can put this in the bumper. You can put it up on the cowl like some organizations want. Put it inside the car, wherever. Put one on every corner. It will shut off the car. This is the one for the driver, and when this is hooked up, this lights up. So this will be like the on-off for the car. For anyone using the quick car setup, here's the back of my switch. I'll just show you. I've got my starter button is right here, and then we've got our switches here. Normally, these are all on one continuous bus bar, meaning the 12 volts in, which is this heavier wire here, powers everything, including the ignition. In order to make this battery cutoff work, I had to isolate the ignition switch, which is the one right here, from the rest of the things in the bus bar. So we just cut the bus bar, and that's why you see a power lead here running to that switch. This power lead is what's going to connect back to that isolator. So I mentioned before that I'm trying to build everything as sub-assemblies first, so then I can just wire between them. One of the other sub-assemblies is the one for the MSD box and the coil for the car, because I keep those inside the car to keep them safe, since the car's not waterproof or anything like that. They used to be mounted on a panel that went in the passenger footwell, which was relatively well protected. It was a decent spot for it until you had to work on it, and then it sucked to reach. So the new sub-assembly is this panel here, and the difference is this panel has some brackets I got off of Amazon to hang it from the roll cage. So this is going to get mounted to the roll cage in this sort of orientation, run all of my wires to it, and then I'm going to have enough slack and everything that if I want, I can loosen these kind of little dealies there, and I can flip this whole thing back into this orientation to work on it. All right, here we are mounted in the car. It's a little loose right now, so you can see I can swivel it down, get to what I need. Back up a bit, you can see what we're talking about. And when I'm ready and done, you flip it up, tighten it up, and it should all be hidden behind the dash. In fact, let me grab the dash and let's check that. Here is the dash pad, kind of just set in place, and if I reach under, I should be able to pivot my boy down. And you can see we now have access to our MSD box from under there. When we're all done, flip it back up, tighten it up. It's protected and out of the way. And for those worried about the length of the coil wire, talked to MSD, they said 3 foot is kind of their max, but people have gone longer. I'm only gonna need about 24 inches, so should be good. So one thing you haven't seen yet is the taillight sub harness. Super simple. I've got one wire for the lights themselves, one wire for the brake lines, and a ground. And it's all run through the factory location out to the taillights. So left this nice and long so I can build it out to wherever I need to go. There's an accu sump under there with a connector that things will hook up to, battery. The isolator and the circuit breaker will get mounted over there. But let's get the rest of the subsystems in place first. All right, and there is the gauge cluster temporarily in place. There's an actual support rod back here so that when you push the start button, the gauge doesn't flex. This actually mounts to the dash itself. The dash kind of lays over top of this, but this is basically what I want to be able to get to within 30 seconds. I mean, obviously not with wiring and shit everywhere, but I want to be able to quickly pull out the dash so I can get to this state of the vehicle. Because if I can get here, that means I can get back there easy and under there, and well, you get it. All right, so you saw me putting this connector in place. The idea here is I've got a line here, this one for my starter, and this one here for the alternator. They used to run inside the car and they would all meet up at that switch of the dashboard. Again, that made the dash difficult to get out. So now everything's gonna connect up to this, kind of. I do have another post down here that I did when I did the fan wiring, and basically that's stealing power off of the starter, yada, yada, yada. This post is gonna stay over here, just a reference, you can see where we are. That post is gonna stay over there, but it's gonna connect to that one over there. And the starter, instead of going from the starter up to the post, it's gonna go to the post, to the starter, to the fan relays, and then to whatever else is on this side of the car that needs to get power. So I have 4 posts for power over here, 1 more over here. I should have power basically everywhere I need it on the car. All right, so a little progress made. We've got the alternator and starter wires run. This big fuse back here, this maxi fuse, that's gonna run the switch panel in the car. And then this little fuse here with run to the brown wire there, that's gonna be for the brake lights. So main battery is gonna connect up to here, but we'll see that in just a few minutes. Well, a few minutes for you. Not even a few minutes, a few seconds for you, hopefully. We'll see, I don't know, it's late. See. Well, I've been making good on my promise not to film much of this, so you know, we've got stuff going through the firewall. That's what it was before. I do need to add some fuses up here. Kind of look inside the car, and we've got stuff routed back along the cage. Sorry that it's dirty. To the MSD box. Cluster of wires. Dash is mounted. Let's jump to the other side. All right. Dash is mounted up. Really stoked how this turned out with the sniper display right in the middle there. Which leaves us with this stuff. So let me kind of pull those out of the way so we can open the door. So I've got the sill plate back on for the moment just to aid with routing. This all has to come back out and get loomed, but you can see we're going through there. We've got, sorry if it's a little dark, we've got the battery cable running over. Let's see if I can get in here without opening the garage door. And so now we've got our circuit breaker, which is at the front, and our battery cutoff switch. So that's all in place, ready to be wired. There's a jumper between the two. So all that's left is everything else. So I'm going to finish running the wires at the back of the car, get the lengths all right, pull everything out, loom it, terminate the ends, put it all back in, and in theory I should have a running car by the end of the weekend. So wish me luck. All right, taking advantage of the clean dining room table since it's almost Thanksgiving, here is the finished wire loom. I would say it's not my best work, but it actually is. So there's that. But here's the front of the harness. Everything terminated, ready to go. Oh, looks like I lost a... Oh, I know why I did that. Never mind. That's good. That's okay. So everything's terminated. Here's the end that goes to the back of the car. We are not terminated yet, but we're ready to do that. So we'll get this installed in the car. I need to mention it. If you've never used these before and you're doing wiring or routing stuff, get some of these. Let me show you. All right, so what these are, if it'll focus, are little magnetic zip tie holders. And so what you do is you stick this to where you want it, and you run your wires and you zip them up. And if you want to move them later, you can. You don't have to drill holes. They just stick and work. All right, so our little magnetic guys are in place. So there's one right here. You can just undo it if you need to get to the wires, and then stick it back on. Tuck everything up nice. There's one back there. So with that, the wiring harness is done. So starting back here, routes along, makes the connections it needs to make, goes up, follows the frame. That purple wire is my spare wire if I ever want to add something. So that's already hooked up to a switch, just needs to be terminated. Then see it runs down the frame, follows the frame, has some heat protection where it needs to go. The wires pass through here, following the sill plate's not in yet. Run up and terminate there. So I'll get the sill in, I'll get this stuff zip tied up. Then all I have to do is make battery cables and we should be ready to go. So I'll check on my wiring and everything. We'll test it all, but you'll see first tests coming up in a sec. I made battery cables. I need to sideline for a moment to share a frustration with you. The brakes have been done on this car. You saw in the last video, it's been fine. Everything's been good. Haven't touched anything. And I come out this morning and look under the car, and there's brake fluid that's leaking from just a little bit from the front master cylinder. It's actually, leaking back in there, behind where I've put everything. So we'll test the electrical system, but I don't know if the car's coming out of the garage today because I need to go back to the brakes. Anywho. So back on the electrical stuff, everything's hooked up. Should be good. I've kind of double checked wires. Things look okay. So we're gonna just step through the system and watch for smoke. All right, we'll start at the back and we'll work our way forward. I do not have the ECU currently hooked up. You can see that's still dangling down there. So this is just gonna be a test of everything else. So battery is hooked up, hopefully properly. Everything's run like it should be. Let's turn the breaker. My phone buzzing at the same time I did that, it was enough to give me a heart attack. So, breaker, everything looks good so far. Let's move forward. So the first question is, do we have power here? Let's press the button. Kind of looks like no. Ooh, I have power. So I had to click the external kill once. That looks like power, red button. Shut it off, out of the way. We've got power to the system. So let's start with the fan. Both fans working, positive sign. Let me set something else up. Actually, before I set that something else up, let's try the kill switch. So let's just turn on the fan so you can hear it. And we'll come and press this. System dead. Little blinky light. That's all good. All right, I've closed the garage to dim things a bit, so let's turn the car back on. Let's try our lights. So dash lights are on. That's good. I don't see any fires yet. Ooh, and look. We've got lights. This should mean if I reach in here and look at the wall, we can see if we have brake lights. It might be hard to see on the screen there, but I have brake lights. That's awesome. Let me shut this off. Let's go away. Let's try the brake lights again. There, you can see it. Awesome. All right, now let's test the ignition. So power on. And remember, the ignition is separate from the whole other circuit. So those can work, that's fine. We don't know if the ignition will work. Let's flip that on. Ooh, I've got stuff. O2 sensor came to life. TAC did things. I got voltage readout. That's eventually going to go in the dash. Last thing to check is just that the starter works. Ignition's not on, so we just should bump it and that should be it. Perfect. Let's get the computer hooked up. All right, we have 2 tests left. We didn't test the AccuSump, and that's because the ECU wasn't hooked up, the car wasn't ready to fire, I didn't want to do that yet. And we didn't test the ECU, but now there's power running everything. So let's turn it on. So the system's now on. And let's turn our ignition on. We should see something on the sniper screen. I hear fuel moving. It is cold out. We're gonna let that heat up. We'll throw the AccuSump, and if the AccuSump works, then we'll fire it up. So stand by. All right, let's try to fire it. See what happens. AccuSump first. Nothing on the AccuSump. Oh, wait, there it goes. I guess it's just cold and slow. So let's see what happens. It wants to go. It is cold today. And the kill switch kills the whole thing. That's awesome. Sweet. Now I guess I fix brakes. So I do have my handy USB port, and I can use that for tuning the car, but I can also still use the touchscreen, which is very in a much more convenient place now. So we can set up the 2-step. So I'm going to go to Tuning, Advanced 2, and we're going to choose Launch. We're going to enable it, save that, and we've got our rev limiter is currently set at 3000, and the input is on input 2, which should be the clutch switch. So that should be all set up, and hopefully we can test that in a bit. Well, that wasn't as eventful as I hoped. I mean, car works, it's a wiring video. What do you want? It's not gonna be very exciting. And I'm not exactly doing mil-spec wiring, but it is the best wiring job I've done to date, so that's kind of cool. So the car works, it's better, it's safer, all the goals checked, and now we have a cool 2-step, which unfortunately I can't test for you now because of the brake issue that happened overnight. So you're just gonna have to wait for that one. We'll see. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We're gonna get into some aerodynamics on the next one with this car. And I think Mikey is working on a video for Boo. I don't wanna put promises out there, but there may be a Boo related video coming out that doesn't have my face in it, or at least not most of the time. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.